amazing when I read what I used to write at night when there were always a bunch of guys playing spades right outside my cell. And if you've ever been around prison or in a prison ward, you will remember that all the tables are made of metal, and they're kind of attached to the floor, and the bench is the same. So they can just be hosed down with high pressure hoses. Nobody can pick one up and hit somebody with it. And so these guys would, yes.
Tim, would you be so kind as to tell the people who don't know why you were in federal prison?
Oh, okay. Well, it was pretty simple. I had sponsored a guy who had done some bad things, and that the feds didn't like, and some money laundering, some gold manipulation, and he was a member of a super patriot group, and they were tax evaders, and so I had done his fifth step with him and his fourth step, and I knew all about it because he had gone through all this. So I was subpoenaed to testify before the grand jury. Janet Reno and her troops were after this whole gang. And I went in there, and I was willing to testify to everything else, but I would not testify against him. So I was held in contempt and thrown in prison. I was there for 5 months while they tried to make me talk, and I wouldn't do it. Because I wasn't about to screw up the rest of my life. I figure this, if I can say about you that you're a woman of integrity, I don't have to say anything else. Everybody knows you. If I say about you, you have no integrity, I don't say anything else. Everybody knows you. And my life is not entirely centered on AA, but an awful big part of it is. And I couldn't break my word to this guy. And on the other hand, I was not willing to compromise my integrity, my ability to be helpful. Because if I'd broken under that, then I couldn't sit here. I mean, I couldn't look you in the eye and tell you can trust me. So it was, there wasn't really any choice. It was just something that had to be done. But it was a fascinating experience. And I was in a prison ward with everybody in there had drugs or alcohol in their story. Not that we weren't segregated that way, it's just the way it happened. And almost everybody there was in one gang or another. And they talked openly about people they killed and people trying to kill them, and just a whole different thing. And it was a 24-hour nightmare because it was an unsupervised cell block, and something was going on. Did you know that Jerry Springer has a rerun at 4 o'clock in the morning? I don't know around here, but up in Jacksonville he does. And these guys loved Jerry, they loved that violence, and they'd get up, the ones that had gone to sleep, and get up and turn on Jerry Springer at 4 in the morning, scream and yell, and really loved it. Spades games went on 24 hours a day. In spades, in prison, there's a kind of a tradition that when you play a trick, you don't just toss a card in, you slam it like that. But they love to get back about 10 feet, take the card and make a run at the table, and then slam it down. And the card table, the one that was most often used, was right outside my cell. It was an interesting time, I'll have to tell you that. But I got it all down. It's all in writing. And when I'd been there about a month, somebody sent me a softcover big book. And would you know, I was out during the day reading it, and somebody came and asked me what it was, and I told them. Pretty soon there were a couple people asking me, and pretty soon there were 3, and then there were 4, and then there were 5. We got a little meeting going there. Every day we're having a meeting. And so I said, thank you, God. I guess there was a need for me here after all. Some reason for me to be in this joint. So anyway, that's it. There was, I have a felony conviction which I can't get rid of yet. said I wouldn't break my word. That's it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Question?
oh my goodness sakes alive, I didn't mean to get into
Jim,
me. Yeah,
did you have a lawyer?
yeah,
You didn't represent yourself, did you?
heck no. I had one of the best lawyers in Jacksonville. In fact, he's still my lawyer. There was nothing I could do. They had me dead to rights. I refused to testify before a federal grand jury when I had no excuse. If this guy had been my client, they couldn't have made me testify. But because he was my sponsee in AA, I had no defense.
And you couldn't say that you were a member because you would break the anonymity?
Oh, sure, I could say I was a member.
But you couldn't say he was?
No, they already knew that. That wasn't something that wasn't the point. The point was that Janet Reno and her gang decided that people in AA had no immunity, and they were going to clobber me as an example, and they damn near did. They stole my business, they took my car, they took everything, all my bank accounts, they wiped me out.
But not your integrity.
Well, I don't know. It wasn't that difficult, yeah.
And what was your lawyer advising you?
Let's make the best deal we can, which he did. He got rid of their purported money laundering case, their purported RICO violation, other stuff and they had confiscated everything I owned on these pretexts. Federal government has plenary power anytime they wish to use it. All they have to do is accuse you of something, and then they can go seize everything you own. That's what they did to me. And by the time we got that all straightened out, it was all gone. So, but anyway, it came out that all the other stuff that they were talking about was not only dismissed, but with prejudice, so they can never be charged with it again. They tried to get me back up there just last December. They figured they'd take another shot at me. They were trying all these guys, including my guy. So I was subpoenaed to come up there and testify. And I have a dear, dear friend who helped me. We put together an affidavit and stuff, and I went up there, and it ended up, after the judge had reviewed all the stuff, and it was the same judge that had been before him on the prior occasion, and he turned to the federal government prosecutor and he said, "I'm issuing a protective order. You are not ever again in this matter to subpoena this man or attempt to get him to testify. As of today, the protective order, and don't violate that order." And so I walked out. But it was a little tight there for a while. We did an emergency 911 affidavit, and I had a lot of help. One of my partners went up with me and held my hand, because I wasn't scared, but I was, if you'll excuse the expression, I was highly pissed off. I mean, this was a lot of monkey business. So, but anyway, just don't mess with the feds. They got way too much power. I stay out of their way now. I just walk around like a stiff-legged dog. If I happen to see a Fed walking down the street, I want nothing to do with them. Okay, who's going to do the chips? Donna?
Oh, no, I don't know how to do that.
We'll help you.
No, she didn't want to do it. She's embarrassed. Who's going to do them? Come on up here.
Vicki, you do it.
Me too. Okay.
See, you know how to do
I don't
them.
know. Okay.
You were going to
In
help.
South Florida, we have a chip system which denotes different lengths of sobriety. And a white chip is the international sign of surrender. Does anybody want to give up the high cost of living and pick up a white chip? Okay. I think red chip is for 3 months, is it? 90 days?
Yep.
Anybody have 90 days? Blue chip, 6 months. 6 months, you can see colors, blue sky. And what else? Yellow, right? There's no yellow.
Nah, we only have
9
the
months?
3. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why. We've been here for, 2 years now, and we still don't have anything for 9 months. You got to see the secretaries about
Okay, if you
stuff like
didn't have a drink today, give yourself and your higher power a hand.
that. All right, we'll be back next week, God willing, and the creek don't rise, and we'll continue our discussion of the 11th step, and let's close the meeting. This is a quote from Albert Einstein. Strange is our situation here on earth. Each of us comes for a short visit, not knowing why, yet sometimes seeming to divine a purpose. From the standpoint of daily life, however, there's one thing we do know, that we are here for the sake of each other, and also for the countless unknown souls with whose fate we are connected by a bond of sympathy. Many times a day I realize how much my own outer and inner life is built upon the labors of others, both living and dead, and how earnestly I must exert myself in order to give in return as much as I have received and am still receiving. Albert Einstein. That could be incorporated into the big book, just as it is. And this is exactly what we have found. And this is what we have been taught. This is what the big book is bottomed on. If you will recall, when we were back in Bill's story, reading Bill's story together, while Bill was still in the hospital for the third time, he was inspired to the understanding that it was going to be necessary for him to give back what he had been given, that there must be thousands of alcoholics out there who would benefit from what he had received. And so he talked to his friend Ebby about that, and Ebby agreed absolutely. He said, Bill, faith without works is dead, meaning precisely that no matter what our faith is, if we don't put it to work, it's nothing but a bunch of electrons running around our head, doesn't mean anything. And Bill came to understand this. If an alcoholic failed to enlarge and perfect his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he couldn't survive. Now, if we substitute the word alcoholic, if an alcoholic, and we put in if a human being, any one of us, fails to enlarge and perfect our spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, we're going to have an extraordinarily difficult time with the certain low spots ahead. It's absolutely so that the 12 steps are for everybody. The problem is that it takes a great deal of push before anybody's going to be willing to do it, because it requires of us that we become dead honest with ourselves and with another person and make amends and surrender and give up playing God. Recognize that our problems of our own making, that they arise out of ourselves. There are always a few people who are not alcoholic or addicted to anything who see the value in that and are willing to do it. Not many. It seems that it takes a major push before we're going to be willing to surrender to that extent. Nevertheless, the rule is the same, that our purpose here is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Big Book tells us that. Albert Einstein is making it clear here, and this is a guy who could have claimed, as if he wished to, almost autonomy in the field of brains and science. He was so far ahead of everybody else, and yet he talks about he must return what he's received. Well, we receive a great deal in here, and sometimes it's hard to keep it in mind, especially when life begins to crowd in on us a little bit. It's hard to remember where we came from. It's hard to remember what kind of desperate straits we were in. It's hard to concentrate on the miracles that have been worked in our lives. I dare say if we had been diagnosed with irreversible cancer and had suddenly received a full remission, we would recognize the miracle and live the rest of our lives in gratitude for that miracle. We don't seem to have the same reaction when we are relieved of the symptoms of alcoholism, which is an equally deadly, incurable illness. It's easy for us, I guess, to begin to once again depend upon ourselves and congratulate ourselves for how brilliant we are and how hard we've worked, and how finally people are recognizing our value, that we're entitled to whatever we have, rather than considering what has been given us as a gift. Albert Einstein here reminds us that many times a day I realize how much my own outer and inner life is built upon the labors of others, both living and dead, and how earnestly I must exert myself in order to give in return as much as I have received and am still receiving. And this really touches my heart. My sponsors are both gone, but they gave of themselves to me without expectation of any return. There have been hundreds of others, and there still are. I have people in my life who are constantly giving of themselves. And I have continued to receive blessings from God, and I have continued to receive great help from other people. And so I try to keep this in mind every time I would like to congratulate myself on how great I am. Everybody, every human being loves acclaim. Every human being loves to be praised. We all want our fellows to think kindly of us. This is the reason we have the 12th tradition, you know. 12th tradition reminds us that we must stay humble, and we must sacrifice the use of our last names and the acclaim and hero worship that might come from that in order to preserve the unity of the fellowship and also to preserve our own sobriety. Please turn to page 85. We are in the transition paragraphs between the 10th and 11th steps. At the bottom of page 84, we find a paragraph which deals with the return to sanity and the removal of the obsession and compulsion to drink alcohol. Return to sanity is something which was preordained, foreseen in the second step, remember? We came to believe that God could do this. And here, by the time we reach the 10th step, it has happened. We have been restored to sanity. Alcohol has ceased to be any part of our lives. The problem's been removed. Clear back in chapter 4, we were taught that that's what this book was about, to enable us to find a power greater in ourselves which would solve our problem. And here it has been solved. That we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. And strangely enough, we've not even sworn off. The Big Book never asked us to swear off, did it? Never once says don't drink, does it? Why would it? Why would you tell somebody don't drink who can't not drink? The whole basis of everything we're doing here is that we are powerless over alcohol. We can't stop on our own. Tell somebody who can't stop, well, why don't you just stop? Hell's bells, they've been saying that to us out there for years and years and years. Why don't you just stop drinking? Why don't you take it easy? Why don't you drink like a lady? We wanted to, but we couldn't. Instead, the problem's been removed. It doesn't exist for us. It's gone. What a great promise. And yet it's absolutely so. And we're going to keep in that fit condition so long as we stay spiritually fit. But there's the rub, as they say. Staying spiritually fit is not something which is the same as sitting still, not moving. It's just the opposite. Staying spiritually fit means actively seeking knowledge of His will, seeking to do His will, and seeking to carry out His will, and seeking to carry this message to other alcoholics. The Big Book told us all the way back in the third step that God would give us everything we need, and that includes sobriety, obviously, if we stayed close to Him and performed His work well. So here we are in the 10th and 11th and 12th steps, and these are the steps that we use to stay close to God. You see, what's happened here is that as a result of working the first 9 steps, we have been enabled, with God's help, to clear away the wreckage of our past. We've been enabled to put aside and to defeat, with God's help, the defects of character and the insanities and the guilts which have been plaguing us most of our lives. And therefore we have drawn close to Him, and that's where we find ourselves right at this moment as we reach this point in the steps. Now we've got to stay close. And in the second paragraph on page 85, the Big Book tells us that it is easy to let up on this spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Take the victory we have achieved and say, that's enough. I don't have to go any further with this. The problem's been removed. I've been restored to sanity. I'm spiritually fit. Hooray for me. Now I'm going to listen to all of my bright-eyed friends who tell me that I cannot allow myself to become an AA junkie, that I can't become dependent on AA, that I've got to get a life, and I've got to balance my life, and on and on and on and on, all of which means precisely that I am to take charge of my life again, when I already found out way back in the third step that it was futile for me to try to do that. That was my problem. I was trying to run my life to suit myself. I tried to play God, and it didn't work. And when we get to this point, if we are tempted to say, I've arrived, I've graduated, now I get to do what I want to do, hooray for me, we want to go back and think about what we did in that third step. Did we or did we not decide that hereafter, in this drama of life, God was going to be the director, and He would be the principal, and we the agent, and we're going to let Him be the father, and we'd be the child, and we didn't limit that to so long as we're still working the steps, and until we have a spiritual awakening after that, we can go back to doing our own thing. There were no reservations of that kind in that third step. Of course, back then we were pretty desperate, weren't we? But now the miracle has occurred. Now we can begin to look at our part in this and say, man, I really did a good job here. And I know all about this stuff now, and I've decided that I'm not ever going to drink again, because I know what the consequences would be, and there are a lot of people out there in the rooms who keep telling me all I have to do is keep it green. Remember my last drunk. Remember that I'm only as sick as my secrets. Remember that if every time I come to a meeting and whatever is bothering me, I got to dump it all over everybody, and then I can walk out free of it. I got to remember that, as they told me back there in treatment, that I really am my feelings. AA keeps telling me I'm a spirit, but I prefer to be my feelings. And a lot of people are going to fall for this, unfortunately. It says we are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. And here's the truth: we are not cured of alcoholism. The disease is in remission, true enough. And it will remain that way so long as we remain spiritually fit, continuing to carry the message, continuing to return, as Albert Einstein said, as much as we have received and are still receiving. Albert Einstein recognized the paradox: we keep absolutely nothing that we're not willing to give away. It's just the truth. A paradox doesn't sound like truth, does it? It sounds like something kind of weird and oddball and off the wall. It turns out that the very definition of paradox is a truth which does not appear to be real, but is nevertheless the truth. And so, what we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. There's the truth of it, and daily reprieve means exactly what it says. We don't build up any credit in heaven by doing good deeds today, not so far as alcoholism is concerned. Every day is a day when we must, as it tells us, carry a vision of God's will into all our activities. What's the 12th step say? Practice these principles in all my affairs. And so what we're really looking at here is, again, the truth, that the AA program is a program of daily application of certain principles which are stated as steps of action in the big book and on the walls of meeting rooms around the world. Our job here then, and as we're told in the 11th step, is to seek through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out, so that we will know each day how to do this. Every day is a day when we must carry a vision of God's will into all our activities. How did I get that vision if I didn't ask for it? And of course, if we pray and meditate in the morning, that's what we do. We ask God to show us what He wants as we go through the day. God, what do you want me to do next? What's my next step to be? Thy will, not mine, be done. What's so hard about that? And yet we don't do it. And we wonder why we feel bad. We wonder why we relapse. And all of this stuff is simple. Simple, simple, simple. Dead simple. It just takes a little effort. It takes a little discipline, and it takes a little willpower. 1/10 as much as we ever had to apply in chasing down the next drink, especially when we were broke or when people were watching us. If you were locked up in a treatment center and you wanted a drink, you found some way to get it. If you were locked up in prison and you had to drink, there'd be a way to get it. Same way with drugs, I guess. So every day we must carry a vision of God's will into all our activities, which means precisely that if we're doing that, then we are practicing the principles in all of our affairs every day, so that every day is a day that we are concentrating on our spiritual fitness. Therefore, we do have and will keep and always have a daily reprieve. And therefore, we will not be resting on our laurels, and therefore we will remain spiritually fit, and therefore we will remain in this state of grace where the problem of alcohol has been removed and doesn't exist for us, and alcohol has been defeated. And the same thing is going to be true of drugs or nail biting or lint picking or nose picking or anything else. It just doesn't matter what it is that plagues us. If in any way it's blocking us from God, it'll be gone. It won't exist. It won't exist. It's gone. The problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. And then as we go through the day to practice this principle of daily spiritual growth, we say as we go through the day, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. Now, why would we do that? We've just discussed part of it, but there's another reason. What is it that has brought us to this place where we can say that clearly I have entered the world of the Spirit and the problem has been removed and I've been restored to sanity? It's because we have reached a point of surrender. You see, we ask God to take away our selfishness and self-centeredness. Relieve me of the bondage of self, we ask Him. And He did. But that is not a permanent condition. God doesn't take us back and throw the old thing into whatever it was into the scrap heap and mold a whole new perfect thing, some kind of robotic human being that will never make mistakes again, never have any more difficulties. Just quite the opposite. That which was wrong is fixed. That which was wrong can come up again. And we have to be constantly on guard against that. That's why we have the 10th and 11th step inventories. So we stay self-aware so that we don't allow this stuff to catch up with us. Remember the pony in the bedroom for a month. Expecting to have a clean bedroom? No, no, no. Clean up that pony poop every day. It's the only thing that works. And so the big book tells us a little bit further along that we're undisciplined people, and we have to let God discipline us in this way. One of the ways that we stay in a state of surrender is that as we go through each day, we consciously take the action of surrender, which is, Thy will, not mine, be done. God, what do you want me to do next? God, what is my next step to be? Whatever your prayer might be, it doesn't matter. As long as we consciously turn to God and make that surrender. God, I offer myself to Thee. Again I offer myself. Do with me and build with me as Thou wilt. Take me, I'm here. Use me. We surrender every day. That's the way we stay out of self. So you see how important this is? This is not just some little thing that'd be kind of nice to do. It's life and death. If I'm in a state of self and selfishness and self-centeredness, I am clearly blocked from God, aren't I? If I'm in a state of surrender, doing God's will, then I'm in God's pocket, aren't I? And that's where we want to stay. And then it tells us that these are thoughts which must go with us constantly, that they're the proper use of our will. In other words, we will ourselves to turn our will over to God. The proper use of our will is to make ourselves do the right thing. And at first we have to do it that way because we are basically and naturally selfish and self-centered. We have to make ourselves do the right thing at first. Take inventory, pray, meditate, work with others, get to a meeting. After a while it becomes the way we live our lives. And then we wouldn't have it any other way. But at first, the application of our willpower to do the right thing, do the next right thing, do it now, no excuses, no foot dragging, just do it. That's critically important to long-term sobriety. Now finally, the last paragraph on page 85 is a paragraph of huge significance. Back in the 4th chapter, if you will recall, we were reading about this business of finding God deep down inside ourselves. It's only there that He could be found. That in each man, woman, and child is the innate idea of God. It's always been there. Of course, we've been busy denying it and pushing it aside, haven't we? Let's see what's happened now. We've reached the 10th step. Much has already been said, that's true, about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. it's important for us to understand what this is saying. Receiving. We're going to be given. We're getting these gifts. They will come to us. We don't earn them. We make ourselves available. We open ourselves up. We become willing to accept these gifts. Strength and inspiration and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. Now, I know most of you have been in meetings centered around humility. And everybody wants to talk about being humiliated and all that stuff. And there are all kinds of definitions of humility. But I ask you, if you agree with this sentence, that God has all knowledge and power, is there anything left for you or me to be prideful about? I don't think so. Maybe that's the whole answer to humility. To understand and agree and accept as a fact that God has all knowledge and power. Whatever we have is derivative. These things are gifts that we've received. And when we accept that, then it's very easy to remain humble. Not humiliated, but humble. Simply knowing our place in this universe of things. Doesn't mean we're useless. Matter of fact, each of us being utterly unique and a creation and a part of God's Spirit, each of us has great value. And there is no doubt about it that as we sit here today, each of us is an integral part of the universe. Think about it this way. Go down to the beach, take one grain of sand off the beach, carry it out the Everglades, and toss it into the Everglades. Two things have happened. It'll never be the same beach again, and it'll never be the same Everglades again. That's not even metaphysical. It's just purely logical, isn't it? And that's where each of us is. So many times when people are new, they are denigrating themselves. They have come to a point where they have their definition of themselves is a person of no value. They've been so imbued with the idea that they are rotten, stinking, miserable, weak, dishonest people of no value to anybody. Somehow or another, they've come to accept that, and it is never true. Never true. Unfortunately, when we accept that as our definition of ourselves, we will act in accordance with that, and then it becomes extraordinarily difficult to recover. And somewhere along the line, each of us has to come to the point where we have decided that our spirit, our soul, our life is worth saving. That we have value. And that we are not willing to simply wait to be tossed on the scrap heap of life. That we're going to do something about it. And once we make up our minds that we're going to do that and we start doing it, everything starts to change, and sometimes very quickly. Very quickly. But we got to do the work. And that's the rub, getting people to be willing to do the work. This is not a program for sissies. Sissies, weaklings, don't make it in here. It takes courage. Think about it. It takes courage to face ourselves. It takes courage even to contemplate the prospect of facing ourselves. We who hadn't looked in a mirror in 6 months. We who duck and dive and stay out of the way, do geographics, hide, isolate. And now we're faced with the prospect of coming out totally. Whatever is there is going to come out. It takes courage to do that. And so many people don't have that courage. And they walk away, they leave the miracle behind them. And most of the time we don't ever see them again. It takes courage to do this work. You guys have the courage, you're here. I am extremely grateful to my God that He gave me the courage to do this and to continue to do it. Now then, let's see what else we have here. Remember again in the 4th chapter that we found out that we were going to find God deep down within ourselves. Second sentence in that last paragraph, if we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. There are a number of things here to consider. Carefully followed directions. What in the world is this? Everybody I hear these days talks about suggestions. Meaning, of course, that I don't have to do it if I don't want to. These are only suggestions. Hazelton's got a much better bunch of suggestions. And that gal down at the treatment center with a master's degree in psychology has a much better set of suggestions. And the people who are rewriting the big book have a much better set of suggestions. And I really don't have to do it because it doesn't matter. I was told the other day by a speaker sitting right up here at this podium that it doesn't matter how you work the steps, just so you work them. Now I like all that because I love the easier, softer way. I love to make up my own stuff as I go along. I'm gonna evade and dodge and deny as much as possible. I don't want to have to do all these things, and they're telling me that this is only suggested anyway. Whoa, wait a second. Go back to basics. What does this book tell us on the very first page? We are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this volume. You're reading a history here, guys. This is a history of how they recovered. This is what they did. And they're saying to us, we honestly and thoroughly believe that if you do what we did, you too will recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That's what they're telling us. But here are the things that we did. And we're suggesting to you that you might want to do them too. We're not saying to you each of these steps is suggested in the way it is and you can do it any way you want. They didn't know that. They didn't know that there was any other way. This is what they did. This is what they're passing on to us. And in 1939 and 1840, you could have said, what the hell do they know? They've only been around there for a little while. They probably just make a lot of this stuff up. This is 2003, and millions of people have already recovered following precisely the directions that they gave us in this big book. What more proof does anybody in here need that it works? So if we have carefully followed directions, we have commenced to sense the flow of God's Spirit into us. Maybe it is this way. Maybe it is that God is Spirit, and we are Spirit, and He is of us, and we are of Him. Looks that way to me. Feels that way to me. And the connection is right there. Because to some extent we have become God conscious. Conscious of the God within, conscious of the God of the universe, God conscious. Not some of us, had nothing to do with religion. Forget that scurrilous piece of trash in the back of the book called Appendix 2. Utter nonsense, balderdash. All of us become God conscious if we do the work, if we carefully follow directions, conscious of the God within. and all of us develop a vital sixth sense, which means that by this time we have the ability to be in conscious contact with our higher power. 11 steps sought through prayer and meditation to improve our what? This conscious contact, right? And we've already achieved it. Now the 11 steps is going to tell us to improve it through prayer and meditation. So you see how far we've come, and you see where these things take us, and each one, they just all dovetail together. So here we are. We are God conscious. We are in contact with our God. We have the ability to be inspired and intuitively receive messages for God to talk to us in one way or another. We're able to divine what it is that He's saying to us. We don't know for sure how we know, but we know. What a great gift this is. And it all comes about because we have done the work to be freed from those things in ourselves which were blocking us off from God. See, this has always been there. This power has always been there, but we were blocked from it. And now we're not. That's all this means. This is just a recognition of a fact that God is there, God has been there. He was always available to us, but we were blocked from Him by our defects of character, our insanities, and our guilts. And now these things are gone. And we've opened the door. Of course, from now on, it's going to be necessary for us to stay that way, isn't it? We're not going to rest on our laurels, get back into the same shape we were in before. That place of rebellion and defiance and denial, that place of spiritual bankruptcy. Because until you separate these two inventories, you don't have a clue as to what's really going on here. And that's something that we're going to be discussing at length. The 11-step inventory at night is absolutely essential. In fact, it is so important, so powerful that the failure to use that inventory at night can often lead people into a relapse situation. We'll get into that a little bit more as we go along. The prayer and meditation part of the 11th step seem to be obvious, but in fact they are not. There's a lot more going on there than meets the eye. For example, meditation is not optional in a program of action. It's an absolutely essential part of our program of action. Think about it for the second. I have a dear friend who's visiting with us today, Frank. And if I were to go to Frank and ask Frank a very important question and then walk away without waiting for the answer, Frank would think I'd gone nuts, wouldn't he? Why would you ask me the question if you don't want to hear the answer? Well, what happens when we pray and ask God for help and then we don't listen for the answer? We go on about our business. This is exactly where meditation comes in for us. It has a number of purposes. Probably the most important one is for us to listen, to be aware, to put ourselves with God and to be aware of what God has to say to us. Also, of course, meditation is a form of surrender. Surrender is critically important to us. This is one of the tools that we use to stay out of self. How important is prayer? Only the bottom line of all of this. So important that it can never be overstressed. You remember, I believe, that Dr. Silkworth wrote his opinion, which is published in the first part of the book. The last word in Dr. Silkworth's opinion is pray, even though he himself was not a religious guy. But there's a history to that. You see, he saw what was going on in his hospital. He saw these guys from AA coming in there, and working with the hopeless, helpless drunks that he had pushed off to the side that he knew he couldn't help. And one of the things he observed them doing, and they were talking together, but then they would be praying together. And son of a gun, these hopeless, helpless drunks were getting up out of their beds and walking out of his hospital. That wasn't too surprising. What was really surprising is 30 days later they'd be back, sober, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, carrying the message to the next guy in the next hopeless, helpless bed, and he'd look up and son of a gun, they were praying together. He couldn't miss it. It was happening for all of the 2.5, 3 years before he wrote that opinion. He saw it. So he said, you might come to scoff, but hopefully you'll stay to pray. The last word in his opinion is pray. It turns out that all the way through, prayer, turning to God in prayer. This is where we take our leaps of faith. This is where we say, okay, I'm going to just have the faith, try to have the faith that God will hear this and that the result will be as promised. And then we pray. And then the result comes and it is as promised. And we say, wow, that worked. This stuff really works. We have prayers all the way through these steps, and they are continuous. But what are they? Are these prayers for riches? Are we praying to God and asking Him to give us a house on the bay and a 50-foot Matthews and a trophy blonde and a big bank account, money in the Caribbean all stashed away just in case? No. We're asking Him for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. That's pretty skinny, isn't it? I mean, aren't we supposed to be able to pray for all the stuff that we want and think we need? There are religions that tell us so, and maybe they're right, I don't know. But in AA, our approach is quite different. Seek and ye shall find, ask and it shall be given you. I've heard that. We've been seeking and asking for everything and trying to get it and manipulating our way to get everything we wanted all our lives. And we've had to come to a halt on that. And when we said, God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt, we meant it. We had to, because we were powerless and we were sinking. And we were on the way right out of life. So somewhere along the line we had to make a decision to give up trying to dictate to God what He ought to be doing for us, and to begin to believe that we will get everything we need if we stay close to Him and perform His work well. And as it tells us in one of the stories in the back of the book, when we get what we need, we will invariably find it's just what we wanted all along. We just don't know what's good for us, you know. We think we do. We're so bloody smart. If we're so smart, what the heck are we doing here? It was our worst thinking that got us here, not our best thinking. Don't listen to some of this stuff. I mean, it just to say it denies the truth of it. Our worst thinking got us here. Our screwed up thinking, our insane thinking, our goopy thinking. Our minds didn't work right. We were crazy. We were insane. We thought we were doing wonderfully well because our minds refused to recognize the truth, because we were in a state of self-delusion, self-denial. So therefore, there are 3 parts to the 11th step, and as we go through the reading of the 11th step, we will see how each of them is differentiated and how each of them also pulls together. And there's a 4th little part that's kind of inserted, not much recognized, but we're going to be studying it probably not today, but next Sunday. This is something we do in the morning when we get up. we review our day. We look to see what's out there for us to do today. And it's a real good idea to make out an agenda. This is what's on my plate today. This is what I need to do today. And then we ask God to direct our thinking during the day. And we ask Him to take away selfishness and self-centeredness and dishonesty. And this is a vital, small part of our day. One of the things which is so important is once we have our agenda written down, we know what it is that we need to do today. Tonight, when we go back to review our day, we can look to see, did I do what was in front of me today? Did I, in fact, do what was on my plate today? Because, let me tell you something. I never met anybody who felt successful who was unhappy. And I never met anybody who felt like a failure who was happy. And what do we mean by success in here? If I can look back tonight on my day, and I can say truthfully that I did what was in front of me to be done today, I did what was on my plate today, I did the next right thing today as it presented itself, I didn't hurt another person, and I left the results up to God. If I can look back and say that those things are all true, I will feel like a success no matter what the results might be. And you know why? Because I've come to understand that when I leave the results up to God, however it turns out, that's His will for me. Want to know what God's will is for you? Do the next right thing, let Him have the results, and you'll find out. Because the results will tell you. It's pretty interesting and simple, isn't it? And so, excuse me just one second, I just want to make sure we understand this. If we look at success in terms of having done what we're supposed to do, having done our part, having done the next right thing, then success is there for us every day. And when we feel successful, we will have happiness. Yes?
And that's the 11-step inventory that you're talking about.
The 11-step inventory is where we look at this day correct and see if this is in fact how we lived our life today. You're absolutely right. Thanks for reminding me.
And so the 10th step would be you would be going back and saying, well, I didn't do it all right, and now I'm going to make an amend, and I'm going to try to...
No, the 10th step is what we do as we go through the day, and as we go through the day, we make corrections on the spot.
Okay.
The 11th step is where we look back and see if we did that. If we left anything undone. Now we got to make corrections tonight. Mainly, the 11th step is for us to, the inventory is for us to find out if we've gotten off the path today. And the reason for that is the 11th step is the only place in the whole big book where we are instructed to ask God for forgiveness. And the forgiveness is for getting off the path. You remember back in the 4th step where we learned that if we get off the path, if we stray from the chosen ideal, that if we are sincerely sorry for what we've done and are willing to let God take us on to better things, we'll be forgiven. That if we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, that we're quite sure to drink. And when we get up to the 11th step, that's brought forward for us, and it's saying to us now, every night, look to see if you got off the path or not. And it's wonderful if you can say that I did stay on the path. Feels good. And that seeing that I stayed on the path, I know that I'm staying spiritually fit, and I feel good, and I feel happy because I feel successful. I did what I was supposed to do today. That's the way you get happiness, is to have the success of doing the next right thing, doing what you're supposed to do, not leaving anything undone. It's amazing how easily that works. And then we want to go out and search for happiness with all the artificial stuff, and it doesn't work. It might work for a little while, but it doesn't last. It's not real. Something which is induced, and we used to think we had to induce that with alcohol and drugs. Now we don't have to have that stuff to be happy. All we got to do is the right thing. It's amazing. It always was there for us, we just didn't know it. We didn't know how to do it. Nobody ever told us this is what you need to do. They told us all about morals and ethics, but they didn't tell us how to adopt them into our lives. Now that we have the steps, we know how to do that. Okay. Any other questions so far? Down at the bottom of page 85, step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. And that sounds like a kind of a noxious little sentence, doesn't it? But it's not at all. I mean, that sentence is loaded. It works. Let's take the middle part out. It works if we work at it. Now, what in the world does that mean? That means that we're going to be consciously using prayer in our daily life. This is part of us. This is part of the way we live our lives. And then we have to have the proper attitude. Go back to the promise. One of the promises, our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Attitude is something which we're really going to be looking at now, because when we get the 11th step, we're taking a PhD in recovery. Now we're getting up there where the nuts really crack, because we've gotten rid of the stuff that was blocking us off. And now we're going to learn how to stay in that state, if you will, a state of grace, a state of miracle, staying in God's pocket, staying nestled in His arms, staying spiritually fit, any way you want to put it. The proper attitude means simply that when I pray, I'm asking God to show me what He wants me to do and to give me the power to carry it out, and I mean it. Back in the 4th step, you may recall we were reading about this back there, where if we get jammed up on the sex matter, some relationship problem. In our morning meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific problem. And what's the tagline? The right answer will come if we want it. See, there's the right attitude, the proper attitude. Not that I'm going through some kind of formula here, but that I'm actually asking God something which I intend to follow through on. And whatever the answer may be, I intend to accept the answer. That proper attitude. It's the attitude of surrender, isn't it? And humility, and attitude of gratitude, they say. Now, it would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. Now, this next paragraph is the 11th step inventory. Let's talk about this for a minute. There's no necessity of waiting until the 11th step to start doing this. I try to get people writing just as soon as possible. The best way to do this is to keep a journal. And you say, well, wait a second. This doesn't say, right here, it doesn't say in so many words, write it down, does it? And a lot of people will argue with you that they feel that you ought to be able to do this inventory in your head. Balderdash. Balderdash. You get so lost before you get through the second or third question. Our minds just naturally run off. We're going to get out there and dance with the clown. There's going to be all kinds of stuff to distract us as we go. And before we know it, we've either fallen asleep or we've said, oh, the heck with it. There are 10 questions here that need to be answered every night. The way we do that is we write down the answers. And those who write down the answers find that it is extraordinarily effective. Why? Because nothing ever gets ahead of us. If you're doing this inventory in writing every night, you'll never do another 4th step or 5th step. Never need to. There'll be nothing there to go back to. Anything you missed in your 4th step will come out in this 11-step inventory. If there's something hanging around the edges that needs to be taken care of, it'll come out. So we can, if we assume that an inventory must be in writing, just as the 4th step must be in writing, just as the 10th step needs to be in writing, the 11th step needs to be in writing too. I was doing my 11-step inventory on my 47th day of sobriety. In those days, in the early 60s, that was slow. I was very slow. The rule then was 9 steps in 90 days or less. But usually most people are doing a lot better than that. I've taken people through the steps in 6 days. And you can do it if you want to put in the time and effort to do it. In any event, since that time, I've been keeping a journal, and they're stacked up all over the place now. I have them in California in storage. Most of the stuff is out there. But it's a wonderful record, and there's all kinds of stuff in there. I've been all over the world, and there's a record of my stay in Colombia and dealing with the drug dealers down there, and my days working with Dan Gurney and Carol Shelby and racing cars at Indy and around and in Europe. Days with the horses and thoroughbreds and racing horses and raising them. All kinds of stuff. It's all in there. I have a journal of my 5 months that I was incarcerated in the federal prison. It's about 4 years ago. That's not in California. I still get to read that once in a while.